Picture this. It's the morning of the most important job interview of your life. You've prepared for weeks, researched every detail, polished your resume, rehearsed your answers in front of the mirror, and mentally imagined yourself acing it. You step out the door with confidence, dressed to impress, ready to make the best first impression possible. But then, just as you're about to step into the building where your future could be decided, something happens. Your heel snaps. Your shoes break. You're left standing there in a moment of panic, wondering if this could be the one thing that ruins everything. What do you do? Do you turn around and run back home? Do you give up before you even step into the interview room? Or do you find a way to overcome it, keep your head high, and still make it inside that door, no matter what? Well, what if I told you that despite everything going wrong at that very moment, she not only overcame it, she walked away with the job? Yes, you heard me right. She got the job. Now, I know you're probably wondering, how is that even possible? How can something as simple as broken shoes lead to success? Isn't an interview all about showing your skills, qualifications, and personality? What does a wardrobe malfunction have to do with all of that? I'm going to answer all of that and more, but you need to stay with me. I promise you, this is a story you're going to want to hear in full. You see, this isn't just about broken shoes. This is about resilience, about how the things that go wrong in life don't always need to define us, but rather, they can be the things that push us forward. It's about thinking on your feet, no pun intended, when everything is falling apart around you. It's about showing the world that you can handle whatever life throws your way, no matter how big or small. And let's face it, we've all had moments where we thought the world was ending. But sometimes, those moments turn into our greatest opportunities. So, what happened next? Did she freeze? Did she panic? Let's back up for a moment. We need to understand the context of her life, her journey, and the inner strength that led her to this very moment. This wasn't just any ordinary interview. This was her chance to prove herself in an industry that had always seemed out of reach. She had been trying for months to land a position in her dream company, an opportunity that she had dreamed of since she was young. It wasn't just a job, it was the chance of a lifetime. She had been through rejection after rejection, putting in countless hours of hard work, networking, and doing everything she could to get noticed. And finally, the call came. She'd been selected for an interview. But here's where the twist comes in. The morning of the interview was anything but smooth. She had prepared meticulously for every detail except for one small thing. It was the one thing she never anticipated would be a problem. The shoes. The very shoes that were supposed to make her feel like she had everything under control. The shoes that were supposed to help her walk into the room with confidence, knowing she had what it took to succeed. The very shoes that betrayed her. So there she was, standing outside the building, feeling her heart race as she tried to figure out what to do. Should she go back to her car and try to fix them? Should she call and reschedule the interview? Or should she just give up entirely? That's when something clicked inside of her. She realized that if she let this little setback stop her, she would be letting life dictate her outcome. And she refused to do that. She was determined to walk in their broken shoes and all, and prove that nothing could stand in her way. Now, let me ask you something. How many times have you had a moment where you felt like everything was falling apart? Maybe it was an unexpected challenge, a mistake, or something outside of your control. We've all been there. But the question is, what did you do in that moment? Did you give up? Or did you find a way to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult it seemed? The truth is, we're all faced with obstacles, some big, some small. And while we can't always control what happens to us, we can control how we react. This story isn't just about shoes breaking, it's about that defining moment when everything feels like it's going wrong, but you choose to keep going anyway. But here's where it gets even more interesting. When she walked into that interview, broken shoes and all, she didn't just carry herself with grace, she carried herself with confidence. And that confidence, it was magnetic. It wasn't because of the clothes she wore or the polished appearance she tried so hard to perfect. No, it was because she didn't let the small things, like broken shoes, hold her back from going after what she wanted. And sometimes, that's the kind of attitude that sets you apart in a sea of applicants. It's that refusal to give up, that quiet resilience, That's often more impressive than any resume or perfectly rehearsed answer. As she sat in that interview, she didn't make excuses for the broken shoes. Instead, she turned it into a story, a moment of vulnerability that showed she could handle the unexpected. And guess what? That honesty, that authenticity, was what made her stand out to the hiring managers. In that moment, she was real, and that realness spoke volumes. It wasn't about how perfectly polished her shoes were, it was about how perfectly polished her attitude was. And that's something you can't fake. I know what you're thinking. Is this just about shoes, or is there a deeper lesson here? You're right to ask that. This story is about more than just a wardrobe malfunction. It's about the courage to keep moving forward when everything seems to be falling apart. It's about not letting the small things derail your progress, but using them as opportunities to show your strength and resilience. So, if you think this is just about shoes, I'm here to tell you there's so much more to this story than meets the eye. Now, let me leave you with one question. What would you have done if this happened to you? What if you fail again? Olivia had always been someone who believed in the power of hard work and perseverance. Her resume was solid, filled with internships, volunteer work, and a couple of freelance projects that had given her the kind of hands-on experience she needed. But when it came to relationships, both personal and professional, she struggled. It wasn't that Olivia was socially awkward, far from it. She could hold a conversation with just about anyone. But relationships, especially professional ones, were tricky. She'd been burned in the past, more than once. Her first big job offer right after graduation had fallen apart at the last minute. She'd been so sure that she had nailed the interview, only to receive a rejection email the next morning that felt like a punch in the gut. The hiring manager had seemed so engaged, even impressed, during their meeting. Yet, as Olivia later found out, the position had already been promised to someone else, someone who had an inside connection. That experience, although painful, had only pushed her to work harder, to be more strategic. She wasn't going to be blindsided again. But this time, it was different. This time, the opportunity had come from a reputable company that Olivia had admired for years. She had watched from the sidelines as colleagues, mentors, and even friends got hired by the company. And now, after months of sending in applications, networking relentlessly, and going to every interview she could, her persistence had paid off. The phone call had come. The email had arrived. The interview invitation had been a dream come true. But as much as she wanted to celebrate, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. In the days leading up to the interview, Olivia's mind wandered to places it probably shouldn't have. She couldn't help but notice how the person who had referred her to this position, a former classmate named Rachel, had become increasingly distant. Rachel had been a major influence in getting Olivia the interview, but lately, something felt different. It was subtle at first, small changes in the tone of Rachel's messages, the way she started to give vague responses when Olivia asked for advice. But what really struck Olivia was how Rachel seemed to suddenly be too busy to offer any support. It didn't make sense. Just a few weeks ago, Rachel had been enthusiastic, telling Olivia how she'd definitely land the job if she kept up with the hard work. Now, it was like a veil had been dropped over their once friendly connection. Could Rachel have backed off because she had her own agenda? Was she perhaps more invested in seeing Olivia succeed than Olivia realized? The more Olivia thought about it, the more she started to doubt if everything about Rachel's help was as innocent as it seemed. Had Rachel intentionally distanced herself so Olivia wouldn't know something important? Maybe Rachel had a reason for pushing Olivia toward this job, maybe she was trying to sabotage her in the process. But then, Olivia's mind shifted again. What if it wasn't Rachel at all? What if the real challenge lay within the company itself? There had been whispers in the industry about cutthroat hiring practices, with people working behind the scenes to manipulate outcomes in favor of favorites. It wouldn't be the first time that a hiring decision wasn't as transparent as it seemed. Maybe the hiring managers were already set on someone else. Maybe Olivia wasn't truly being considered as a finalist. Maybe the whole thing was just a formality. And then, of course, there was the small, nagging thought that always haunted her whenever things started to go well. What if you don't belong here? As the days passed, Olivia found herself questioning everything. The more she overthought the situation, the more paralyzed she became. Every time she tried to calm herself, the worry crept back in. The shoes, the ones she had spent hours carefully choosing, became a symbol of everything she feared might go wrong. The heel breaking was a reminder of her constant worry that her life, like those shoes, would shatter the moment she thought she had it all together. It wasn't just about the shoes. It was about the idea that something so trivial could take her down when everything seemed so close to falling into place. But then, just when Olivia thought she might crack under the pressure, she remembered what she had told herself months ago: you have to keep going. Even when it seems impossible, you have to keep moving forward. And that's when it hit her: maybe it wasn't about controlling the outcome. Maybe the key to success wasn't about making sure everything went according to plan. Maybe it was about embracing the chaos and trusting that she could handle whatever was thrown her way. After all, hadn't life been throwing curveballs her whole life? Each setback had taught her something valuable, even if she didn't understand it at the time. So, why not treat this situation the same way? But the more Olivia's thoughts circled around this possibility, the more unsettling her interactions with the people around her began to feel. Rachel's sudden withdrawal from the conversation wasn't the only red flag. There was also her ex-colleague James, who had given her a strange piece of advice a few days before the interview. James, a former intern at the company who had recently left under mysterious circumstances, had warned Olivia about the company's real culture in an offhand comment one evening. "They're looking for someone with an edge," he had said, his eyes glinting in a way Olivia couldn't quite place. "And not the kind of edge you think." What did he mean by that? Was it some sort of inside warning, or was it just James being James, cynical, jaded, and eager to throw off anyone who was still in the running? These were the questions that kept Olivia up at night, and as she stood outside the building on the day of the interview, her thoughts raced. She could hear the faint echo of footsteps behind her as people walked past, all heading into the same corporate building. But to her, the building felt more like a maze, an obstacle course where she was forced to make her way through, step by step, unsure of who or what awaited her inside. The irony wasn't lost on her. The shoes that had represented her confidence now seemed like a cruel joke. But deep down, she knew something. She wasn't going to let anything stop her today. As much as the doubts threatened to overtake her, she was determined to step forward, even if it meant walking in broken shoes. But what if, as she walked into the building, she wasn't just stepping into an interview? What if she was stepping into something far darker than she had imagined? His words hung in the air like a shadow. Don't trust anyone inside. What was he trying to warn her about? And why had he waited until now, when she was already so deep into the process? Was this some kind of misguided attempt to protect her, or was there something more to his warning? The questions swirled, leaving Olivia with more doubt than ever before. As if that wasn't enough, things took an even stranger turn when she got home. When Olivia sat down to review her notes from the interview, she noticed something odd in her bag. A small envelope, tucked into one of the pockets of her purse. She hadn't put it there, and there was no way it had been in her bag when she left the house. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, pulling out a single sheet of paper with just a few words scrawled on it: "Rachel knows more than you think." It was a message that stopped her cold, and for a moment, Olivia couldn't breathe. Who had put this in her bag? And what did it mean? Was Rachel involved in something sinister, or was this some sort of sick joke meant to mess with her mind? Was it an ally trying to help, or was it just another piece of the puzzle designed to lead her down the wrong path? The next few days were filled with even more questions. Olivia tried to reach Rachel multiple times, but her calls went unanswered, and her texts were met with only vague replies. The more Olivia pushed for answers, the more elusive Rachel became. And the more she thought about James's warning and the mysterious note, the more she realized that she was facing a much deeper and darker situation than she had originally thought. Was Rachel really a friend? Was James truly trying to help her, or was he the one pulling the strings from behind the scenes? And what did all of this have to do with the job? But the biggest question remained: who was really in control of the situation, and who was lying to her? Just when Olivia thought she might be able to piece it all together, another shocking twist came her way. One morning, as she was digging through her email, she noticed something odd. A job offer, already prepared and signed, was sitting in her inbox. The thing was, It was dated 3 days ago. How could this be? She hadn't even been offered the job yet. She hadn't even been told she was selected. She stared at the email, her blood running cold. Was she being played all along? Was the interview just a formality? And if so, what was the real game behind it all? Stay tuned, because the secrets are only getting darker, and the truth is slipping further and further out of her reach. The deeper she digs, the more dangerous this journey becomes. Olivia is about to realize that the only thing more terrifying than the job itself is what she might uncover if she keeps pushing forward. As Olivia sat in her apartment that evening, staring at the email offer in front of her, the world outside seemed to close in. The walls of her small living room felt like they were closing in too, as though the deeper she delved into this twisted situation, the smaller her world became. The eerie feeling from the day before, the unnerving encounter with James, the strange note in her bag, was growing stronger. Was she really just being paranoid, or was something truly sinister unfolding beneath the surface? The more she looked at the email, the more questions it raised. Why had they already prepared a job offer for her when she hadn't even been told if she'd made it to the next round? It didn't make sense. How could a company like this be so disorganized, or worse, so confident in their decisions that they'd already decided her fate? But it wasn't just the email that had her heart pounding in her chest. A few hours later, her phone buzzed, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. It was a text from her brother, Nick. "I got a weird message today," the text read. "You need to see this." Olivia's stomach dropped. She hadn't heard from Nick much lately. Their relationship had always been complicated. She loved him, of course, but Nick had a way of keeping things from her, and she had learned to give him space when he needed it. But the fact that he was reaching out now, especially with something that sounded urgent, instantly raised her hackles. Nick wasn't the kind of guy who got caught up in conspiracy theories or drama. He had always been practical, grounded. If anything, he was the one who tried to talk Olivia down whenever she got too caught up in her own head. But the tone of the message was enough to unsettle her. She had to find out what was going on. After all, if something was happening to him, something connected to her job hunt, it only added more weight to her growing suspicions. What if Nick had received the same anonymous message she had, or something even worse? What if their worlds were colliding in a way neither of them had expected? She called him immediately. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Hey, Liv," Nick said, his voice strained. "I'm glad you called. I don't know how to explain it." He sounded agitated, almost like he was trying to keep something from her. She could hear the sound of rustling papers in the background. "I got a message today. Same kind of cryptic thing you've been dealing with, I think." Her heart skipped a beat. "What message?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "What did it say?" There was a pause before Nick replied, his voice a bit quieter now, like he was nervous. It was a note, Liv. Left in my car. Right under the windshield wiper. Just like yours, short, no signature, nothing. It said, "The clock is ticking. Be careful who you trust." And I don't know who it's from. I don't know if it's connected to you or your job thing or what, but I've been feeling like someone's watching me lately, you know? And now this. I'm freaked out. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. The clock is ticking. The same ominous warning she had heard echoed in her mind. Her brother, the one person who never seemed to get involved in her messes, was now wrapped up in this nightmare too. It didn't take long for her to realize how serious this was. Whatever was happening was bigger than just her. "What else have you been noticing, Nick?" she asked, trying to stay calm despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. "What else is going on?" Nick was silent for a beat, and then he let out a shaky breath. "Well, that's not all," he said, his voice lowering. "When I got that note, I went inside my apartment to look around. I was already on edge, you know, from work and everything. And that's when I noticed something weird. Someone had gone through my stuff. My desk was a mess. My laptop was open, and it wasn't how I left it. Someone had been in my place." Olivia's mind raced. She couldn't even begin to process the implications of what Nick was telling her. Whoever was behind this wasn't just sending cryptic messages. They were digging into her life, and now, it seemed like they were doing the same with Nick. Why? And what did they want? Her thoughts kept circling back to Rachel, who had set this whole chain of events into motion by introducing Olivia to the company. What if Rachel wasn't just distancing herself from Olivia? What if Rachel was in on it somehow, part of a larger conspiracy? But then, Olivia's mind flickered to James, the strange, ominous warning he had given her. Maybe he wasn't trying to help. Maybe he was part of the puzzle too. Every person she thought she could trust seemed to be a suspect, and the more she learned, the more she realized that anyone could be working against her. Even Nick. Could he be involved somehow? Or was he just another pawn in a larger game she couldn't yet understand? And as if the universe had conspired to make her even more paranoid, a new piece of evidence arrived, one that only made things more complicated. That same evening, Olivia received a second, much more cryptic message. This time, it wasn't a note. It wasn't a text or an email either. It was a phone call. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, distorted, as though it was coming through a voice changer. You've been digging too deep, Olivia. You need to stop. Before things get worse. The voice hung in the air for a moment, leaving her feeling like her heart had stopped. Who was this person? Was it someone from the company? Someone connected to Rachel? Or was it just another scare tactic, part of a larger game to keep her from uncovering the truth? The message ended with a click, and Olivia was left standing there, her phone trembling in her hand, unsure of what to do next. Her world was spinning. Every clue she uncovered seemed to only lead to more questions, and now Nick was involved too. Whatever this was, it was growing more dangerous, and she couldn't tell who to trust. She felt trapped in a web of uncertainty, not knowing which way to turn, and worse, knowing that if she made the wrong move, it could cost her everything. There was only one thing Olivia knew for sure now: this wasn't just about a job anymore. This was about something much bigger, something darker. And she was about to find out just how deep the rabbit hole went. But who was behind it all? Was Rachel the mastermind? Was James part of this twisted game? Or was someone else pulling the strings entirely? Stay tuned. The mystery is far from over, and Olivia is about to uncover a truth she never could have expected. The next few days felt like they were unfolding in a slow-motion nightmare. Olivia couldn't shake the growing sense of dread that seemed to follow her everywhere. Her phone had become an extension of her body, but every time it buzzed, her stomach clenched. The messages, the calls, the cryptic warnings, all of it had her constantly looking over her shoulder, unsure if she was being watched. And it wasn't just the paranoia creeping in. She felt it now, deep in her bones, like an oppressive weight hanging over her every step. Whoever was behind this, whoever had orchestrated all of these bizarre, unsettling events, was getting closer. She could feel it. On the morning of the third day after the strange phone call, when Olivia woke up, the world outside her window seemed unusually still. It wasn't just the silence in the air, it was the absence of normality, the absence of safety. Her thoughts were scattered as she got ready for the day. She grabbed her phone, checked the time, and instinctively unlocked it to scroll through her messages. But what she saw made her freeze mid-scroll. An unknown number had texted her no name, just a string of characters that looked like gibberish, but when she read them closely, they sent a chill down her spine. You think you're safe? They know about your brother. Her blood ran cold, her pulse quickening. She'd barely had time to process the message when her phone rang. It was Nick. She almost didn't want to pick up, but she had to. She needed to hear his voice, needed to know he was okay. Liv, he said when she answered, his voice tight, strained, like he was barely holding it together. I'm scared. His words hung heavy in the air, and Olivia's heart dropped into her stomach. What's going on? She asked, her voice trembling. Nick didn't answer right away. Instead, there was a long pause, and then he spoke again, more quietly this time, as if he were trying to keep the panic from bleeding into his words. I've been followed, Liv. I didn't want to tell you, but I think they're watching me. Olivia's throat tightened. Her mind raced. Who was following him? Who knew about him and his connection to her? Listen to me, Nick, she said, trying to steady her voice. You need to get out of there. Don't stay in your apartment. Go somewhere safe. I'm coming to you. But as she turned to grab her jacket, something caught her eye. A shadow. A figure standing across the street from her apartment window. She couldn't make out their face, but the way they stood there, unmoving, staring at her building, sent an icy wave of fear washing over her. She watched them for what felt like forever, heart pounding, the world narrowing until all she could see was that figure. It didn't move. Didn't blink. It was as though it had been planted there, waiting. Just waiting for her to notice. With a trembling hand, she reached for her phone and typed out a quick text to Nick. "Get out of there. Now." Before she could hit send, the figure turned and walked away, disappearing into the morning crowd. It felt like the world had just tilted sideways. She couldn't explain it, but something about that moment felt off. The fear in her chest was no longer just about the job, about the weird messages, or even the threats. This was real. This was tangible. Someone was out there, watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. And Nick, her brother, was in danger. She ran out of her apartment without a second thought, panic setting in as her heart raced. She had to get to him before whatever was happening to her reached him. The streets outside were busier than she'd expected for that early in the morning, but everything felt like a blur as she rushed toward Nick's apartment. Every corner she turned, every car that passed, every pedestrian she brushed past, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her. The weight of the tension grew heavier with every step. She found herself glancing behind her more frequently, each time expecting to see that same figure, but it never appeared. It didn't need to. The fear was already consuming her. When she finally arrived at Nick's building, it was eerily quiet. No one was on the street, no cars parked along the curb. She rushed up the stairs to his apartment, her breath shallow, her palms slick with sweat. She knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. The silence was suffocating. She forced the door open with trembling hands, only to find his apartment completely empty. Nick was gone. Everything she had been dreading, everything she had feared, came crashing down on her all at once. Her brother was missing. The note. The warnings. The threats. The figure outside her window. All of it was connected. Whoever had been targeting her had now turned their focus on Nick. She felt her chest tighten as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. Was Nick in danger because of her? Had they taken him? And why? Olivia's thoughts spiraled, a blur of confusion, rage, and terror. She couldn't even tell if her next move would be the right one. She had to find Nick, but the odds seemed stacked against her. There were so many unknowns, so many pieces of this puzzle that didn't fit together. Was Rachel involved in this? Was James really trying to help, or was he just manipulating her into something worse? What about the company, the job offer that seemed like a trap? What if the real purpose of the job wasn't just about the position, but about controlling her, about forcing her to play a role in whatever game they were playing? The further she went down this rabbit hole, the darker it seemed. Every answer she uncovered led to more questions, more danger, more uncertainty. And now, with Nick gone, Olivia knew the stakes had risen beyond anything she had prepared for. Whoever was behind this, whoever had been pulling the strings all along, wasn't playing by any rules. They had gotten to Nick. And they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. She needed to find him. But more than that, she needed to uncover the truth before it was too late, before she became their next target. Her phone buzzed again, snapping her back into the present. Another message. Another warning. You're too late. He's already gone. This is your last chance. The message felt like a death sentence. Whoever had sent it knew exactly how to push her to the edge. She had one choice now, find Nick before the clock ran out. But who could she trust? Was there anyone left who wasn't involved in this? The deeper Olivia dug, the darker it got. The questions piled up. The danger escalated. And she couldn't shake the feeling that she was running out of time. Stay tuned, because this twisted game is just beginning and Olivia is about to find out that some things are more dangerous than they ever seemed. The truth is out there, but the closer she gets, the more terrifying it becomes. Yes, Olivia's heart raced. The walls of her brother's empty apartment seemed to close in around her. The tension was thick in the air, and the silence felt louder than any scream. Every inch of the space now felt like a grave, the heavy weight of its emptiness pressing down on her chest. She was supposed to be the protector. She was the older sister, the one who was supposed to keep him safe. But Nick was gone, vanished without a trace, and every second that passed made her feel more hopeless. As she stood in the middle of his apartment, her mind swirling with a million terrifying possibilities, a single thought cut through the fog like a knife. Where had he gone? But then, something shifted. It wasn't just the silence in the apartment, or the eerie emptiness of the room that made her freeze, no, it was the sudden, bone-chilling realization that she was not alone. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as her instincts screamed at her to move, but she couldn't. It was like the room had turned to ice, and every breath she took felt labored and unnatural. That's when she heard the soft sound of a door creaking open. The noise was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to make her turn. Slowly, her gaze traveled toward the hallway leading to Nick's bedroom. She didn't remember hearing the door open, didn't remember seeing anyone enter the apartment. Her heart slammed against her chest as she crept toward the sound, her every step a whisper in the heavy stillness. And then, as she reached the doorway, a figure stepped out from the shadows, someone she had never expected to see. Rachel. Her breath caught in her throat, and her thoughts scrambled, racing through every possible explanation for why her best friend would be in Nick's apartment. She had been so sure Rachel wasn't involved in this twisted game. She had trusted her, confided in her, believed in their friendship. But now, standing before her in the dim light, Rachel's expression was unreadable, almost cold, like a mask she had perfected for years. Olivia felt her stomach twist with confusion and betrayal. "Rachel," she whispered, her voice shaking, "what are you doing here? What's going on?" Rachel didn't answer right away. She just stood there, her eyes scanning Olivia with a strange intensity, like she was deciding how much to reveal. It was as if everything Olivia had ever known about Rachel was being rewritten in that very moment. The person she thought she could trust most in the world now stood before her, a complete stranger. "I'm sorry, Liv," Rachel said finally, her voice low, almost distant. "But I think it's time you knew the truth." Olivia's mind spun as she tried to process her words. "The truth? What are you talking about?" Her words caught in her throat, a mix of fear and disbelief filling her chest. She was about to take a step toward Rachel when her phone buzzed again, an unknown number flashing on the screen. Without thinking, she answered it. The voice on the other end was distorted, robotic, just like the one from the other night. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It wasn't a cryptic message. It was an order. "You were never meant to find out, Olivia. But now that you have to make a choice. Walk away, or we'll take everything. Your brother, your job, your life." The line went dead before she could respond, leaving her standing there, clutching her phone, feeling like the world was collapsing around her. When she looked up, Rachel was gone. The hallway was empty, and in her place was a small, folded note on the floor. It wasn't a threatening message like the others. It was simple, almost innocent, but it sent a cold shiver down her spine. "He's right, Liv. The truth is far darker than you realize. You were never supposed to be here." Her hands trembled as she unfolded the note. It wasn't the words that unsettled her the most, but the faint, crumpled corners, as if it had been hastily discarded. She knew, deep down, that the message was meant for her, but who had written it? Rachel? Or someone else entirely? Had her best friend been playing a role in all of this? Had she known about the shadowy forces pulling the strings? Had Rachel been manipulating her from the very beginning, working alongside them, or was she just another victim, caught in something much larger than either of them had ever imagined? For a moment, Olivia just stood there, frozen in place, her mind reeling. Every decision she'd made in the past few days suddenly felt wrong, like she had been walking blindfolded, trusting the wrong people, walking straight into a trap. What if Rachel hadn't been trying to help? What if Rachel had been working against her all along? Her heart hammered in her chest as the implications of everything she'd learned over the past few days began to settle in. The mysterious job offer. The cryptic messages. The threats. Nick's disappearance. It wasn't about the job. It never had been. It wasn't about her brother, either. It wasn't even about Rachel's supposed betrayal. No, it was bigger than all of that. The truth was something Olivia hadn't been prepared for, a truth that would change everything. She stumbled backward, her mind scrambling for some kind of anchor, some piece of information that would make sense of all this madness. But there was none. The pieces weren't fitting together, they were shattering into 1,000 pieces, and no matter how hard she tried to make them make sense, it was hopeless. Then, in the quiet darkness of that apartment, something else clicked into place. The company, the job offer, the emails, the messages, the warning, the phone calls. They had been setting her up all along, but not for the job. Not for the position. No, they had been grooming her for something much darker, something that would use her, twist her, break her in ways she couldn't even imagine. And Rachel? Rachel wasn't just an ally who had lost her way. She was an active participant. Everything Olivia thought she knew was a lie. The people she had trusted, the people she had loved, had all been part of a grand, twisted game. And she had just walked right into the center of it. The realization hit her like a slap in the face. She was in more danger than she had ever realized, and the only way out was to expose the truth. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the truth might be something no one could escape from. Olivia's world was now completely upside down, and she didn't know if she had the strength to face what was coming next. But one thing was certain, there was no turning back now. Olivia's world had become a maze of contradictions and lies, each turn only leading her deeper into a nightmare that seemed impossible to escape. The truth, if it even existed anymore, was slipping through her fingers like sand. The cryptic messages. The shadowy figures. The sudden disappearance of Nick. And now, the chilling realization that someone she trusted, someone she had confided in, might be at the center of it all. Her mind was consumed by a single question: how far was Rachel involved in all of this? The thought hit her like a punch to the gut. Rachel, the best friend she had known for years, the person who had been there through thick and thin, had betrayed her. Or at least, that's what Olivia had to believe now, given the evidence, the cryptic note, Rachel's eerie behavior, her sudden disappearance after their conversation. But there was something else beneath the surface, something gnawing at Olivia's insides. She couldn't reconcile the woman she had grown up with, the woman who had shared secrets, laughed with her, held her when things got tough, with the possibility that Rachel had been playing a game this entire time. And yet, the more she dug, the more the puzzle pieces fit into place, and they formed a picture she didn't want to see. She found herself standing at a crossroads, a point in the journey where any decision she made would shape the rest of her life. Olivia knew she had to face Rachel, to confront her, to get answers. But the thought of doing so, of confronting her best friend with all the painful truths she had uncovered, felt like an insurmountable mountain. What if Rachel denied everything? What if Olivia was wrong? What if she had been so desperate for answers that she was seeing things that weren't there? What if Rachel wasn't the enemy, but the victim, just like Nick? But deep down, Olivia knew that wasn't the case. She had to face the truth, even if it meant breaking her own heart in the process. She had to confront Rachel, there was no other choice. The next few hours felt like they passed in a blur. Every step Olivia took, every phone call she made, was filled with a sense of dread, like the walls were closing in around her. She had to find Rachel, had to find out what was going on. But as she dialed Rachel's number one more time, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a simple text, yet it sent a cold shiver down her spine. If you want to see Nick again, stop digging. This is your last warning. Olivia's heart skipped a beat, her fingers trembling as she stared at the message. The implications were clear: someone had Nick, and they were threatening his life to keep her quiet. It was a chilling ultimatum: keep searching for answers, and Nick would be lost forever. Or walk away, abandon her quest for the truth, and hope that Nick would be safe. But how could she just stop? How could she walk away, knowing that the very people who had taken Nick were still out there, manipulating her every move? Her breath caught in her throat as she realized that the choice she was being forced to make wasn't just about finding Nick, it was about sacrificing her own humanity. Was she willing to give up her pursuit of the truth to save the person she loved most? Or would she choose to keep going, even if it meant losing Nick in the process? The pain of that decision gnawed at her, each option worse than the last. There was no right answer. But Olivia's mind kept racing, replaying every moment, every detail, every conversation she had had with Rachel in the past few days. The more she thought about it, the more everything about their friendship started to feel wrong. Rachel had always been the level-headed one, the person who kept her grounded. Yet now, Olivia realized she had been too trusting. The last conversation they had, Rachel's strange behavior, the way she had refused to give her any answers, it all pointed to one thing: Rachel knew more than she had let on. In a moment of clarity, Olivia made a decision. She would confront Rachel, no matter the cost. She had to know the truth. She had to understand what was really happening before it was too late. With a mixture of dread and determination, Olivia set out to find Rachel, praying that whatever she learned wouldn't be the final straw that broke her. She arrived at Rachel's apartment, her hands clammy, her heart thumping in her chest. She knocked on the door, her breath caught in her throat as she waited. The sound of footsteps echoed inside, and for a moment, Olivia thought she might turn around and leave. But she couldn't. She had come too far. The door swung open, and there Rachel stood, her expression blank, unreadable, as if she had been expecting this moment all along. "Olivia," Rachel said, her voice cold but calm. "I was wondering when you'd come." Olivia felt her pulse quicken. She wasn't ready for this conversation, but she had no choice. She stepped inside, her eyes locked on Rachel's, searching for any sign of vulnerability, any hint that Rachel hadn't been a part of this twisted web. But there was nothing. Rachel's eyes were too calm, too composed. It made Olivia's blood run cold. "I know what you're involved in," Olivia said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I know you're a part of this. I know you've been lying to me." Rachel didn't flinch. She didn't even seem surprised. Instead, she nodded, as if she had expected this confrontation. "You don't know everything, Olivia," she said quietly. "But I'm not the one who's been lying to you." The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" Rachel's eyes darkened. "There are people who have been watching you, controlling everything. You think you're the only one being manipulated? You think I chose this?" Her voice cracked, and for the first time, Olivia saw the hint of something real behind Rachel's cold facade. Fear. Desperation. "I had no choice, Liv. You don't understand. None of us do. But if you keep pushing, they'll destroy everything. Your family, your life. You. And if you want to save Nick, you need to stop. Now." Olivia's mind spun as the weight of Rachel's words settled in. Had she been wrong all along? Had Rachel been trying to protect her? Or was this just another layer of the trap closing in around her? The choice was now out of her hands. Everything she thought she knew was slipping away, unraveling at the seams. Olivia realized that no matter which way she went, there would be no easy answer. If she stopped searching, Nick might survive, but she would live in a cage, trapped by the lies. If she continued, she risked losing him forever, but at least she would know the truth. But what truth? What price would she have to pay to uncover it? As Rachel stepped back, her eyes filled with something Olivia couldn't quite place, the world felt like it was spinning out of control. She had made it this far, but now, with everything on the line, the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. The answers were within reach, but the cost of uncovering them was more than she could afford. Time was running out, and Olivia had to make a choice. Would she walk away, abandoning everything she had fought for? Or would she risk it all, chasing a truth that could destroy her? Olivia felt her heart pound in her chest as Rachel's words echoed in her ears, but the sense of urgency that followed was even louder. "You don't understand, Liv. None of us do." The weight of what Rachel had said hung in the air, suffocating her. The idea that this was bigger than just her and Nick, that they were part of something far darker, far more dangerous, was overwhelming. She had been playing in the shadows, stumbling through a web she didn't even realize was there. And now, Rachel, her best friend, was telling her there were forces out of their control, forces that had been pulling the strings all along. For the first time, Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning in the apartment. It was the unmistakable feeling of being watched. But before Olivia could process this new, terrifying reality, the door slammed open. The sound was so sudden that it startled her, and before she could even turn, she was face to face with someone who should have been her ally. Her boss, Daniel, the man who had hired her, the one who had promised her a bright future, was standing there, his eyes narrowed with cold calculation. For a second, Olivia froze, thinking it was just a coincidence. Maybe he had come to talk about the investigation. But as he stepped into the room, his expression made her blood run cold. It wasn't just a visit. It wasn't just an innocent meeting. He was here for a reason, and it wasn't to help her. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling, her chest tightening with disbelief. What was he doing here? His lips curled into a half-smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You've been digging where you shouldn't, Olivia," he said, his voice low and calm, but the undertone was unmistakable. It was the voice of someone who knew exactly how dangerous the situation had become. "You've uncovered things that were never meant to be uncovered." Olivia's mind raced. She had trusted him, had looked up to him as a mentor. He had been the one to pull her into this world, this job, promising her a future filled with opportunity. But now, standing in front of her, he didn't seem like the same man. There was something cold in his eyes, something calculating, and that smile, it was twisted. She felt the floor beneath her shift as her reality began to crumble. "I don't understand," Olivia said, the words barely leaving her lips as her heart pounded, desperation creeping into her voice. "What is this? What's going on?" Daniel's expression softened, but only for a second. "You were never supposed to find out, Olivia," he said, almost apologetically. "But you've dug too deep, and now there's no turning back." He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "This whole thing, the job, Nick's disappearance, Rachel's involvement, it's all part of something much bigger than you realize. This isn't just about your family. This isn't about you, either. You've been playing in a game far above your pay grade." Olivia's pulse quickened, the tension in the room thickening with every word. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice breaking, her body shaking from the weight of the revelation. "What do you mean? What are you involved in?" Daniel sighed, as if he were explaining something to a child who couldn't quite grasp the severity of the situation. "You think you're the only one who's been manipulated? You're not. None of us are. This whole company, this whole operation, it's part of a much larger network. You were just a pawn in a game you didn't understand, just like Rachel, just like Nick." His eyes flashed with something darker, something cruel. "And now, you're in too deep." Every word felt like a punch, each revelation knocking Olivia further off balance. The walls were closing in, and the truth was starting to look less like a beacon of hope and more like a trap. The life she thought she had been building, the friends she had trusted, the job that had seemed like a dream, all of it was part of a web of lies, manipulation, and danger. The people she had relied on had been using her all along. Rachel had been in on it. Daniel had been orchestrating it. And now, even Nick, her own brother, had been a pawn in this sick, twisted game. Before Olivia could respond, Daniel held up his hand, cutting her off. "I'm not here to argue," he said, his voice steely and final. "I'm here to give you a choice. You stop this investigation now, walk away, and we'll let you go. You'll be safe, Nick will be safe. It's over." A cold wave of realization washed over Olivia. This was a choice. A choice between her safety and the truth. But the weight of it was unbearable. Was it worth it? Was her life and Nick's worth more than the truth? Could she really just walk away and pretend none of this ever happened? But Daniel wasn't done. His eyes darkened as he stepped closer, his voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. "Or, you keep going. You dig deeper. You keep trying to expose everything. But there's no guarantee you'll make it out alive. There's no guarantee anyone makes it out alive." Olivia felt her stomach churn, the tension in the room almost suffocating. The stakes were higher than she ever imagined. Every second she stood there, the choice becoming more impossible, the danger more real. She had walked into something she could never walk out of. Her safety. Nick's safety. Everything she had fought for, was it worth the truth? But just as she opened her mouth to speak, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the door. They were slow, deliberate, coming closer. Olivia's heart raced. Someone else was coming. She looked at Daniel, but he didn't seem concerned. In fact, there was a knowing look in his eyes, a look that made her blood run cold. The door opened, and Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Standing there, framed in the doorway, was someone she had never expected. Her father. His eyes were cold, emotionless, but there was something in his gaze that made Olivia's stomach drop. He had been absent from her life for so long, a ghost of the past, someone she had barely thought of. But now, standing in front of her, he was part of this, part of the conspiracy. Part of the game. Olivia, her father said, his voice smooth, controlled. It's time you knew everything. The walls had just closed in tighter. Olivia's mind spun as she tried to make sense of the chaos around her. The man who had hired her. The best friend she thought she could trust. And now her father. Everyone she had ever relied on, everyone she had ever known, was tangled in this web. And now, they were all standing before her, forcing her to choose between her safety and the truth, between saving herself or destroying everything in the process. The truth was more dangerous than she had ever realized. And as the weight of her decision pressed down on her, Olivia knew one thing: there was no way out. Olivia stood frozen, her body tingling with the shock of realization as her father's presence felt like 1,000 tons of weight pressing against her chest. He had always been a figure in her life that was more distant than she cared to admit, but never in her wildest dreams did she imagine him as the architect of the nightmare she was now living. The truth, that dark, horrifying truth, was slipping out of her grasp as she stood there, speechless, trying to process what she was hearing. Her father, the man who had been absent from her life for so many years, was somehow tangled in all of this. And yet, the look on his face wasn't that of a man who was trying to hide something, it was the face of someone who had already won. The realization hit her like a slap across the face. She had been played. All of them had been played. She was a pawn in a game much bigger than herself, and now, there was no one left to trust. Her heart raced, every inch of her body screaming to turn and run, to escape this web of lies, but the door was shut. The walls were closing in, and all of her choices, every single step she had taken in this labyrinth, had led her here. Her father's presence wasn't just a shock. It was the final piece of a puzzle that had been slowly revealing itself, twisting and turning in ways she could never have anticipated. She looked around the room at Daniel and Rachel, both of them standing in silence now, eyes trained on her with that same unreadable expression. They weren't just bystanders, they were complicit in the nightmare. Every friendly gesture, every reassuring word from them in the past few weeks now felt like a lie, a mask to hide the darker truth that had been festering beneath the surface. Her father's cold eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something familiar, a faint trace of the man who had once been her protector, before everything fell apart. But it was fleeting, quickly replaced by the steel-eyed resolve of someone who had long since abandoned any sense of morality in pursuit of something bigger. "I told you, Olivia," he said, his voice cold, almost mechanical, like he had said these words 1,000 times. "You were always meant to be part of this. You just didn't know it yet." It felt like her stomach had dropped out from under her, the ground beneath her feet suddenly vanishing. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling, almost too soft for anyone else to hear. "No. This can't be true." "Don't be naive," her father said, his words cutting through the air like ice. "You think any of us have had a choice in this? You think I chose this life? No, Olivia. It's bigger than that. It's always been bigger." He took a step closer to her, his gaze unwavering, as if he was trying to force her to understand something she wasn't ready to. "This isn't just about Nick or you or even Rachel. It's about power. It's about control. This world, this game we've all been caught in, it's all about knowing the right people, pulling the right strings. Your brother's disappearance. That was the catalyst. But you, Olivia, you were always going to be the one to finish it. You were always going to find out, whether you wanted to or not. And now, here we are." The words hit her like a flood of ice-cold water, drowning her in the weight of their meaning. The pieces of the puzzle that had once seemed so impossible to connect, her father's absence, Nick's strange behavior, Rachel's secrecy, Daniel's sudden involvement, all of it was part of a plan. A plan that had been laid out long before she ever realized. And now, the final act was unfolding before her eyes. She was no longer the curious daughter, the struggling investigator, she was the final piece. The piece they needed to close the deal. The rage inside her, the sense of betrayal, burned hotter than anything she had ever felt before. So, all of this, everything, the lies, the danger, the threats, it's all been a game to you. Olivia's voice shook, but there was no mistaking the fire in her eyes. You never cared about me, did you? About Nick? Her father's expression softened, but only slightly. I care about what you can do, Olivia. What you've always been capable of. What you're meant to be. His gaze flicked to Daniel and then to Rachel, and something dark shifted in the air. We all have our roles. You were never meant to be just a pawn. You were meant to be the queen. The words hit her harder than she expected. The queen. The realization began to settle in, and the implications were terrifying. She was the one who had been positioned in this game, the one who had been groomed for something she hadn't even known she was a part of. She had been played by everyone she thought she could trust, all of them working together to manipulate her, control her. But now, Olivia was awake. She wasn't going to just play by their rules anymore. Before she could respond, the sudden sound of a phone ringing cut through the tension in the room. Everyone froze, their eyes snapping to the source of the sound. Olivia's hand instinctively reached for her pocket, her fingers trembling as she pulled out her phone. It was an unknown number. The one thing that had been haunting her throughout this whole ordeal. She stared at it for a split second, then answered. Olivia, came a voice on the other end, calm and familiar. It was Nick. Her brother. Her breath caught in her throat. Nick. Where are you? What's going on? Are you? Olivia, Nick interrupted, his voice low and urgent. You need to listen to me. It's all true. Everything. They've been using you, but you can't trust any of them. Not Dad. Not Rachel. Not Daniel. They're all part of it. They're using you to finish what they started. His words hit her like a slap, and Olivia felt her stomach drop again. You need to get out of there. Now. You're in danger. The phone cut off, leaving Olivia standing in stunned silence. Her mind raced. Nick was alive. He was warning her. But what was he really saying? What was the truth behind the game they had all been sucked into? She turned back to her father, to Daniel, to Rachel, and felt a deep, consuming realization sink in. Everything she thought she knew, everything she had trusted, was part of the trap. And now, she had one choice, to escape or to take control. Without thinking, Olivia acted. She lunged for the door, pushing past her father and Daniel, her heart hammering in her chest. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about taking back control of her own life. She had spent too long in the dark, but the light was blinding now, and she wasn't going to let them control her fate any longer. She ran, her breath heavy in her chest, her legs moving faster than she had ever thought possible. And then, just as she reached the door, a loud crash echoed behind her. She turned, eyes wide in panic. But it was too late. The door swung open, and standing in the doorway was someone she hadn't expected to see, someone she hadn't even known was still in the game. Her mother. And every last piece of this twisted puzzle suddenly fell into place. The night was quiet now, the kind of stillness that only followed a storm. Olivia stood alone at the edge of the city, the weight of everything that had happened settling into her bones, heavy and unyielding. She had escaped. Or so she thought. But as the cold air bit at her skin, as she gazed out into the darkened horizon, the truth lingered in her mind like an itch she couldn't scratch. Everything had changed, but had it truly ended? Or was she simply standing at the edge of a new beginning, a new game, one that she might never fully escape from? She didn't know anymore. Her mother's appearance at the door had been the final blow, the revelation that tied everything together, at least, for now. Her father, Daniel, Rachel, even Nick, all of them had been part of a vast web of lies and deceit. She had been manipulated, a pawn in a game she had never signed up for. But in the end, Olivia had outsmarted them. She had exposed the truth, had fought back when they thought they had her cornered. But as she stood there, breathless and alone, she couldn't shake the feeling that victory had come at too high a cost. Nick was still missing, no one had heard from him since that fateful phone call. Was he truly gone? Or was he part of something else now, another player in the game she had thought she'd escaped from? She couldn't afford to believe that the nightmare was over, not when everything still felt like it was hanging by a thread. The final confrontation with her mother, the one person she hadn't expected to be involved, had thrown Olivia off balance. Her mother's cold, calculating gaze had mirrored the one her father had worn earlier, and for a moment, it felt like she was seeing the truth about the people who had raised her. They had built a life on lies, on manipulation. But even as her mother had stepped back into the shadows, her words echoed in Olivia's mind. "You were always meant to be part of this, Olivia," she had said. "Don't you see? There is no escaping it. There never was." Those words felt like a prophecy, like a warning. And yet, Olivia had walked away. She had made the decision to leave it all behind, to cut herself off from the people who had orchestrated her downfall. But as she stood there, the city lights flickering below her, the distant hum of traffic sounding like a haunting reminder of the world she was leaving behind, Olivia knew one thing for certain: peace wasn't something she could just reach out and grab. It wasn't something that could be handed to her. It had to be earned. And in the end, what she had learned the hard way was that peace, real peace, could only come when she had taken control of her own story, when she refused to let anyone else write it for her. But that didn't mean the story was over. The truth had come out, but it had left more questions than answers. What had really happened to Nick? Was he gone for good, or had he gone into hiding, like Olivia had? And what about her father and mother? Were they still out there, pulling strings in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to pull her back in? The phone call from Nick had been a final twist in the tale, a promise of something more, something unresolved that left her on the edge of a cliff. Was he alive? Was he working with her, or was he part of something even darker now? Olivia didn't know, and maybe she would never know. Maybe that was the cost of uncovering the truth, that some questions would remain unanswered, mysteries would remain unsolved. And yet, in that moment, standing alone in the city that had been both her prison and her salvation, she realized that some part of her wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore. She had faced the worst of it, the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, and she had survived. The phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her from her thoughts. It was a text message, one she hadn't expected. It was from Rachel. The message was short, cryptic: "You don't know the full truth yet. But you will. Be careful." The words hit Olivia like a punch to the gut. She had thought Rachel was out of the game, that her best friend had betrayed her for the last time. But now, the message made her wonder. Had Rachel been playing her all along? Was she a part of something larger, something more dangerous than even Olivia had realized? Or was this just another game, another attempt to pull her back into the web of lies? As Olivia stared at the message, her heart pounding in her chest, she realized something. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. The people who had played her had underestimated her, but they hadn't given up. And as she stepped away from the edge of the city, her mind swirling with questions and doubts, she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't going to let them control her any longer. No matter how deep the web was, no matter how dark the truth became, Olivia was done being a pawn. She was ready to take the game into her own hands, no more running, no more hiding. The final twist in her story wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. And as she walked away from the city, from the life she once knew, Olivia understood something that no one had ever told her. Sometimes, the only way to find peace is to leave everything behind, to walk away from the past and never look back. But as she disappeared into the night, she couldn't help but wonder, was there truly such a thing as freedom when the past was always waiting to catch up? The answers were still out there. And somehow, Olivia knew, they would always be just beyond her reach, pulling her back into the game.